not panelist, moderator me. I'm managing director of Luminate. It's an accelerated investment fund for optics and photonics companies in the area. I'm a 3-time entrepreneur, and I've worked for some other businesses, and now I'm doing this. If you know any brilliant optics, photonics, or imaging companies that want to get moving and want investment, illuminate.org, look us up and apply. So first, I'm going to start with the panel. At the far end, we have Heidi Trost. Heidi Trost is the founder and director of user experience at voice+code. As a user experience researcher and designer, Heidi's passion is to help businesses measure and optimize their user experience while making the digital realm safe, usable, and accessible. Voice+code is a user experience research firm that helps organizations go beyond analytics to answer the most important user experience questions. Why is this happening, and how do we fix it? In doing so, they help clients increase revenue as well as customer satisfaction. Please welcome Heidi Trost. Our second panelist is Dave Fuerher. Dave Fuerher is a 2-time cancer survivor, patient experience researcher, and digital health innovator. He's the co-founder and CEO of GRYT Health, a digital health company that connects individuals with similar experiences and engages them to inform, support, and facilitate improved disease management and well-being. In his recent TED Talk, Dave describes how he catalyzed personalized adversity, patient experience research, and digital technology to create an app to connect, empower, and transform the living with cancer experience. Do you want to say where they can find it?
Yeah, free apps in the App Store of Google Play globally.
So next on our panel, we have Michele Liddle from Perfect Granola. I have to say, I live Michelle's product. It's like sits in cases in my house. So Michele Liddle is an award-winning salesperson and a 2017 Women of Excellence Award recipient. She founded the Perfect Granola in 2016, and the company is now one of the fastest-growing granola and granola bar companies in the Northeast. Perfect Granola is our 2018 National Parenting Product Award winner for Best in Family Products, Best New Granola in America, and the Victor New York's 2018 Women-Owned Business of the Year. The company was created on the foundation of giving back, and everything they do has to do with the community in mind and help our children fight poverty and homelessness. And they're really good. And then next on the panel, we have Antonio Calabrese. He is the founder and CEO of Boonle, right? Boonle. Antonio Calabrese is the founder of CEO Boonle, a Rochester native and an RIT grad. Antonio went from working in corporate sales to freelancing as a web designer and marketer. He launched Boonle in 2015 after going through the struggle of starting and building a successful freelance career with little experience, and is now on a mission to help thousands of others do the same. Finally, we have Yasmin Mattox. Yasmin is a researcher and entrepreneur with a background in the social sciences, specifically international affairs. She's the founder and CEO of Arkatecht, LLC, a company established in 2017, which creates digital products to reduce working mothers' mental load so they can more effectively accomplish their career advancement and family goals, and ultimately plan, design, and build the lives they truly want to lead. She's worked in the legal, mental health, renewable energy, policy, and higher education fields, with the common thread being her expertise in and passion for conducting interdisciplinary research and analysis. She founded Arkatecht after her own experiences dealing with the so-called mental load of trying to balance family and career, which led to her determination to create decision optimization tools. Thank you all of you for being here, and we're very excited to have this panel. So the way we're going to do this is I have some questions that I have written, and Solar in here, but we'd also like to just go around and let people on the floor ask questions. But before we go to the floor, I'd like each person on the panel to take a turn, starting at that end, Heidi, and tell us about your business, your position, and what are some of the important priorities in your life? Children or elder care, or what's a major extracurricular activity? Tell us what you have to balance.
So I'm the director of UX at voice+code. What that means is I help clients understand why they're not meeting their user experience goals for their digital products, and then how to fix those. Typically that's through the most effective method, and that's observing users as opposed to looking at analytics and trying to make analytics tell you something that it's not able to do. So I do a lot of the research myself. That means a lot of time meeting with people in the usability lab lab conducting usability studies. In addition to my work, I'm an avid horseback rider. I do hunter jumpers, if any of you know what that is. That takes up a considerable amount of time. So, you know, in juggling that, I just try to fit it in whenever I can. It's not easy, but those are two of my passions is, you know, usability and user experience and horseback riding.
I am an entrepreneur by accident, and what I mean by that is I started out life doing what I thought life was supposed to be about. Graduated college and became a researcher for Pfizer, did everything that I thought would lead me to where my aspirations in life were meant to take me, and then 2 cancer diagnoses in my 20s sort of really forced me to face what I wanted my life to really be about. And so I can't take any wisdom for leaving that life. That life broke. And so I left that world to create a company that helped people get through what I was going through. And by that, what I mean is being a researcher is a very empowering experience in life, being able to analyze a lot of data and find insights and have defensible things to make decisions. And when I was going through cancer, none of that equipped me for what it was like to go through cancer. And so our company, GRYT Health, does that for people now. We put power in their hands so that in the most out-of-control moments in their life, they have information and access to be able to do things that I was too overwhelmed to be able to do on my own.
And I'm Michele Liddle. I founded the Perfect Granola in 2016. I got the idea to do this. I was working a full-time job and a part-time job, and I'm a mother of 2 young kids, but I was volunteering at our local food pantry, and I noticed that there was not a lot of healthy, allergy-friendly food on the shelf, but a lot of people going in looked just like me. They were young families that had kids, and they just needed healthy options for those kids. So I got the idea to start a food company where I could share all the food and the profits with those in need and start feeding the hungry, but then in turn hire the same people that were walking into the food pantry and offer them an opportunity to change their lives and to make an impact on their community in their own way. So in 2016, we founded the Perfect Granola, launched into retail in June. We've quickly become one of the fastest growing granola companies in the Northeast. We sell in 3 different verticals, our main one being retail, with stores like Wegmans and Tops and Price Chopper, ShopRite, Gallo Fresh. We'll be shipping in Walmart through the end of December. We're going to start shipping nationwide for that store. And we've got 2 more in the pipeline that we'll be announcing next month. But everything that we do has the community in mind. We share 5% of our profits with existing homeless shelters, outreach centers, and food banks. We now support a 23-county region in upstate New York. Last year was our first full year in retail. We donated over 12,000 pounds of food to support Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse. We now hire students living in poverty. Right now, our poverty stats are about just over 50% of our kids are already living below the poverty line, and just over a little bit over half of them are graduating high school. So we've started a student program where we hire students, give them opportunities, we pay them above minimum wage, we give them mentorships, and we get them professionally work ready. So when they finish high school, they can join the workforce instead of the poverty cycle that continues to fuel the hunger issue in upstate New York.
Again, I'm Antonio, founder of Boonle. Boonle is a freelance marketplace that connects US-based students with businesses on both graphic and web design type projects. And regarding priorities, I think that when it comes to running a startup, your time is very consumed. You're very focused on always constantly trying to grow and grow and grow. And it becomes very important to have a set of priorities that are outside of business activities. So for me personally, I have 3 main priority categories that I focus on, and those are personal health, so taking exercise and nutrition very seriously, because you need to have the mental clarity to constantly be changing and trying to grow. The second is family and friends, so making sure that you're always staying surrounded by the people and keeping those that you care about close to you. And the third is just being able to prioritize and clearly organize your day so that you're accomplishing what actually needs to be done and not always being distracted by social media and all the other things that kind of pull us away from business.
Hi, I'm Yasmin Mattox, and my company is Arkatecht. It's a bit ironic, or perhaps fitting, that Arkatecht is a startup that really aims to reduce the mental load for so many working mothers. So you often hear of working mothers and fathers lamenting about juggling family and career. I think a lot of people, and certainly I'm no different, have the experience of perhaps getting married or meeting whoever their partner is, realizing that they want to have children, but nobody ever tells you what happens after. Nobody ever tells you how to prepare for a life that is fulfilling and led by both what you desire to do intellectually with your career, but also personally. Whether that's, in our case, creating families, so raising children, how do you really go about doing that? Arkatecht specifically came out of my experiences having children, specifically my second child, when I had very severe postpartum depression. And like so many women that we've had the privilege of speaking with, resentment was big. So the idea that your spouse is able to move on in their career and you really wish them no harm, but you wish you could accomplish the same, but nobody really tells you about how to do that, how to efficiently manage both family and career advancement. So Arkatecht creates tools to help women do that in various ways. We actually start our pilot program tomorrow, so it's an exciting time. As for prioritizing, I'm going to be very frank. It's very difficult, for me especially, which is why Arkatecht was founded. But true to what we set out to do, it's really about integrating family and career. So, for instance, if there are work functions that I can attend or do where I can incorporate my children in some way, whether that's through education, having them watch a program so they can get a sense of what I'm doing so that they can start to cultivate their own interest intellectually. That's what it comes down to. So even if parents are not present with their children at a certain time, they are still having an impact on them relative to what they're doing out in the workforce.
So I'm going to move on and ask a second question, and after that we're going to start taking questions from the audience. For your question, I'm going to start on this time, and I'm going to ask, when and how did you know it was the right time to start your business? And how did you validate that I want to start this business?
So validation has come up several times, but at the very beginning, I think it was a matter of reflection, because I have gone through the issue that we're solving for. And so it came about in conversations with mothers and fathers, actually. It came about in just doing Google searches to see what people were struggling with, what they were trying to find answers to. It came about when I would mention the hypothesized, I'll use that term, problem, and without just simply saying, oh yeah, that's true, I agree with that, they wouldn't parrot back to me what I had said, but they would go deeper, and they would start to really fixate on their grievances related to the problem. And I think that's when I initially knew, okay, there's something there. It's not just me, it's something new.
I don't think there's really ever a perfect time to start. You can try to plan and time it, but it's really just about starting to do it. And for me, I had gone through the struggles of leaving my comfortable corporate 9-to-5 job that paid me really well, got into freelancing and found some success there. For me, it was just that moment of understanding that I knew other people were going to experience that same issue, and I thought that I had a solution to help those solve that problem. So what I did, and this is a failure that you can learn from when it comes to validation, and I know it was touched upon in this room earlier with Rich, is the validation process I went through that I thought was really great. Is I began to survey people to get feedback on, hey, if I implement this, how do you think that's going to happen, or what do you think is the best way to do this? The people I surveyed ended up being all of my friends and family, and of course they're super biased. So the direction that I wanted to go in, they kindly steered me in that direction. And the first iteration of the product that we launched was nowhere near where we needed to be. It's not what the market wanted. So I think just start doing and use or build whatever you need to do in its most simplistic way. You probably hear the term MVP thrown out a lot. And go out and find real customers or potential customers, people you don't know, go to events, and really try to understand what people want and how you can start to build that in, and then make your business decisions based on that feedback.
In mine, I think it doesn't really correlate. So my whole thing is there's never really a perfect time either. And when I decided to launch this company, I had a full-time job, 2 part-time jobs, and a 1 and 4-year-old, 5-year-old. They're 4 years apart. 1 and 5-year-old. So it definitely wasn't a good time. I was extremely stressed out already as a new mom and full-time worker. I was traveling 2 to 3 weeks out of every month, shipping milk across the country because I was a nursing mom at the time. So it certainly wasn't the best time in the world for me to be starting a company. But I figured I put the girls to bed by 7:30, 8 o'clock. I had a good 2 to 3 hours of productivity time where I could do something. I could either sit on the couch or I could try to change the world. So I decided to do the later. And through the first 1.5 years of creating the company, I still worked full-time and kept one of those 2 part-time jobs. Because at the end of the day, I'm still a mom and still have a mortgage and bills to pay and things. So it was definitely really tough in the beginning. So I would say to anybody who's looking to start a company is find that time where it is you time and you need to take some time and care for yourself, but turn that you time into something productive that you're passionate about, that you really feel like can drive you into the next direction of your life maybe. That's what I decided to do. Ended up working out, so I was able to finally leave my full-time position about a year ago. But there's never going to be that perfect time when the stars align and somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, now is your moment. You've got to kind of create that moment and make sure that everything else is still taken care of in your life while you start a company, because it's risky and it's tough and it's stressful, and let's face it, we don't know if we're going to fail or succeed. So, you've got to make sure that you've got everything else in place and kind of create your company.
The reason I'm most honored to be a part of this group on stage is because our businesses are a reflection of our values. And until you find something that you're willing to put everything you've got on the line to bring to life, I don't know that you're at that point yet, but for me, and I know for all of us, we had something in the world that needed to be better or needed to be different. And that is the only thing, knowing for me personally how awful my situation was, that keeps me from giving up against the insurmountable odds of building a business. And I will thank 1,000 people for helping us bring it to life, but at the end of the day, if you don't have that fire and something that you will be known in the world for making a difference in, that's to me the thing we have to find.
It's hard to follow, Dave. I shouldn't have sat next to him. Yeah, I'll just reiterate what the other panelists have said. Being an entrepreneur is finding a problem that you really want to solve and you want to back with all of your might. The first iteration of my company was in response to being a freelancer in New York City. I was helping build iPad and iPhone apps, and the user experience was just awful. I was embarrassed to say that I had been part of this team. So I was like, I could just start my own company and do this better, right? And the other part of it was, watching family members struggle watching my mom struggle to use the computer, she still does, but my passion was I want to make this more usable for people like my mother, safer, so she doesn't download software that she didn't need to download, more accessible for people. And the second iteration of my company, voice+code, was kind of taking that one step further. So it's hard to get companies to pay attention to accessibility, usability, making the web safer, making applications safer, if there isn't some sort of return on investment for them. So our methodology couples the return on investment with the user experience so that companies are more excited about investing in measuring and optimizing the user experience because they can see the dollars flowing in as a result of that investment. So, yeah, to reiterate what everyone else has said, you have to be really passionate about the problem and finding a solution to a problem.
Okay, before we turn this over, I have to say something kind of humorous. I had faced a situation where we were working on something, and they said to me, this software needs to be so easy your mother could use it. I'm like, you realize my mother has a master's degree in math and a software engineer? Yeah. My mom's better than me. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to the audience. Does somebody have a question that they'd like to ask our panelists here? If you do, please raise your hand. We'll bring the mic to you. If you don't, I'm going to put words in your mouth. Don't be shy. There we go. We have a question up there.
So I have a question for Michele. So working full-time, 2 little kids, 2 part-time jobs, what did your family say? What did the people around you say when you decided to launch your own business?
I'm going to repeat her question for the back of the room. In balancing your family and your children, what did the people and friends and other people around you say about this decision?
They thought I was absolutely crazy. My husband still thinks I'm crazy, but he thought I was crazy before he married me, so I guess he knew what he was getting into. But when I told people that I was going to start a granola company and feed the world and change the shape of the food industry, to this day people still think I'm a little crazy. There's a lot more that I have in mind for our company and the direction that we're going to be moving, and it's going to be so exciting when I can share everything with everybody. But it was really hard to sell, especially to my husband, because I had a very safe, full-time job, and being a mother and knowing everything that was on our plate as a young family, to say that in the future I was going to leave all that behind and risk everything that we have, empty our savings accounts and take a home equity line out and not be devoting more money to college funds for a few years and things like that. It was definitely a hard sell. But now that we've been having some success, it's a little bit easier for people to jump on the bandwagon. Once you've got things like Wegmans in your pocket and Walmart and things like that, it's a little bit easier to sell the story. But starting a company, I think, is high risk for anybody, no matter if you have kids or you don't, or you have a full-time job that you're thinking about leaving or you don't. It's a risk that if you're passionate about something and you really truly believe in it, I think it's a risk that everybody should try. If you've got it and there's something that you really want to solve, and for me it was simple. The first time I got a thank you letter, the first time we made a donation, that's what validated it for me. Even, I hate to say it, but even if the company fails tomorrow, we've already been successful. We've been putting kids through rehab programs. We've been donating food to feed people. We've been mentoring our students. So that's really what drives me. I've had a real big vision in my mind. So no matter what anybody said, I knew that I was going to do it, and it didn't really matter. You could either join me or watch me.
May I add something to what you just said?
Sure.
I think there is so much drama around entrepreneurship, and shows like Shark Tank and all these things really accentuate what it's like to do something on a big scale. And for anybody starting out, it starts with the people closest in our lives believing in us. My wife let me and us use the money we were saving for our first house after we got married to start the technical development on our app. And if it had not been for my wife seeing in me and supporting how much I knew this was something I had to do in the world, she never would have, and she's been a supporter the whole way. And our first investor could see the fire that we had and what we brought, and our first customer. And you know, it's not starting out by changing the whole world at one time. It's finding the people that believe in you and finding the successes, and every little one builds to something that today, now 4 years in, I'm remarkably proud of. And if it hadn't been for my wife on day one, I never would have gotten to our first investor, you know, 100 days later. And so that to me is, you know who believes in you and always remember that.
He's going to bring you the mic, so.
Hi. My question is to each one of you in the panel. What was your initial investment, monetary?
Why don't we start, Antonio?
Personal investment or raised?
Yeah, both would be good.
Well, I initially raised $100,000. If you don't mind, I have a really fun short story to go back this up, because it wasn't through a traditional means. About 4 years ago, before my wife and I got married, a friend had called her up, and I have yet to meet this friend at the time. And he goes, "Hey, clear your weekend. I'm going to come pick you guys up on the private jet, and we're going to Key West." And we're like, all right, who doesn't want to do that, right? So weekend comes, we hop on the plane, we shoot down to Key West, or to Florida, we hop on a boat, there's a captain on the boat, hops on and goes, all right, we're going to take a 3-hour ride down the Gulf Coast on this boat. And so this is the first time I'm meeting my investor at this time. And he's a CEO of a decent-sized company, and we start talking, and he just starts talking about some of the startups that he had been investing in, and I thought that it was a brilliant time to pitch him on this great idea I had. And so the long story short is that I didn't land the funding at that time, but just having that conversation led to, months down the road of us having future discussions and going through that process until we ultimately got a deal. So I guess my takeaway is that, continue to have conversations and meet people, because you never know what will come from it.
He's too young to be afraid of a 3-hour cruise.
That was my first thought, exactly. You go differently.
Yeah. So it's since increased, but the initial investment, and I thank my lucky stars that my mom, she's now retired, but she's an attorney. So I'm very risk averse in terms of seeking to avoid litigation. So I say that to say the first investment, which I think was critical for Arkatecht, was actually retaining counsel, which is Boonle. So I knew from right off the bat that before any real work could be done, and at least should be done in our case, we wanted to be protected. We wanted IP concerns to be addressed as an initial consideration rather than an afterthought in the form of crisis management. So I don't recall the exact amount. It was under 2,000, but that was the first investment. And I still say that for us, at least, that was the best investment that was made.
For our company, our first initial investment was personal funds. I emptied my life savings and my husband's, which he still reminds me of on occasion. That consisted of $90,000. We launched the company with that, with all of our packaging and inventory, and also everything else that it took to design the website and trademark and things like that. And then I was still working full-time for 1.5 years, so every extra penny also went towards the company. So we're all in at about 120 right now. We raised around last year as well through Launch New York, which is an incredible investment tool. You get a mentor as well that helps you with your company. And then with that funding came a small follow-up round with private investors.
my wife and I had $47,000 to both of our names, and it was me in a bedroom with a chair. I worked with no income for 2 years and spent every penny of that. I borrowed $97,000 from my mom to get to the next wave. Our first investor came in because we were starting to develop at that point at $50,000. We had more friends and family come in after that. We closed our seed round at $900,000. We commercialized last year. We're doing another $1 million raise right now. That's a quarter funded, and we're announcing next week a partnership with Omnicom, which is one of the largest agencies in the world, and we're going to do a creative branding global launch of a product with them in the next few weeks. So it is literally inch, inch, inch to get to really big step. So every one of those things I feel every day.
So I freelanced for about the first year of my company, so I was able to bootstrap some of those initial costs of, forming the LLC, the legal fees, and things like that. I had most of the software. Thankfully, I know how to build my own website. I can make my own business cards, logos, that sort of thing, so I didn't have to invest in that. So we've never raised outside funding.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question before I turn it back, because I want you to be able to get to answer this. But I would like, and it's a slight variation of something, so I'm confident in you on that one. I want each person to tell me what something was, like an epic fail in your professional experience, and what did you learn from that? So,
Just one.
Well, you have to pick one. Some of us can go through our failures over a while, but
Name one that happened before 8 a.m. this morning.
something that in that moment you're like, oh, this is just the bottom, but then you learn something. So, Yasmin, you want to start?
Oh, okay. I think the biggest fail for me was assuming that because I had made peace with the struggles I had experienced trying to, so to speak, juggle family and career, that everybody had, that target users, target clients, target customers, whatever term you want to use, had made their peace with that struggle. And this often came out in social media interactions when, we would put things out there and wonder why nobody's really having a conversation with us. And what came about was that a lot of people weren't comfortable having the conversation about how to advance in their career and also, managing what they're doing with their families. Because if you have, colleagues or bosses that are, contacts or connections or Facebook friends, what have you, they can see your content. And so that was a pretty epic fail because I think we lost a good 2.5 months trying to figure out why it seemed like nobody was really biting. Until I had a pivotal conversation with my mother actually, and she said, everybody's not comfortable like you are comfortable with it now. And once I realized that strategically we can make better decisions in terms of how to move forward, tactics to use the term back channel communications or diplomacy, that was really implemented rather than a full frontal, communication.
I'm going to share this failure because it piggybacks a bit on the last question about fundraising, because I think most people who go to start companies or want to be an entrepreneur always just think about have to go raise a lot of money, right? I mean, when I first started, I was reading TechCrunch and Mashable every day, and all you saw were multi-million-dollar raises and multi-million-dollar acquisitions. You're like, I'll do this, pocket a few $1 million, piece of cake. But when I raised that initial money, I literally raised that money before I had a company. And I took the feedback that I got, that I shared earlier from family and friends, and thought I had great feedback, and I used a large chunk of that money to build something that nobody wanted. And when I look back now, I realize that that money could have taken me so much further if I went about that process a little different. So just because you raise money doesn't mean you should just spend it on the best stuff or the most expensive things, or just because you think an idea is good. I think I would go back and start much smaller scale, and take those learnings and build a product that will actually get used by people and that people will pay me for.
I think one of my biggest failures, because I'm sure, I don't know if I'm sure, but I think as a startup and as somebody who's starting a company, you fail every day, probably at least 20 or 30 times a day. But I feel like one of my biggest failures was trying to grow the company too big too quick. Our first major win was Wegmans, and when I talked to the buyer and I asked him, what's distribution look like? How do I figure this out? He steered me in two directions with two different distributors that work really well with Wegmans. One of them being a national distributor, one being a regional. Not knowing too much about the food industry, I thought bigger was better. So I went with the national distributor, thinking that they had boots on the ground, they had salespeople in place, they would sell my product for me and really help me out. Well, the reality of it is nobody cares. I am a startup, granola company, very small. Wegmans was my first account. So their salespeople didn't care about me. I'm not a national brand. So that hit really hard because I had put all my effort into getting them inventory and ad campaigns going and funding sales and things like that through the distributor. And in reality, they didn't care about me. They weren't pushing my product, and in fact, overbought inventory for me and then made me buy it back. So that really almost could have crushed my company. The nice takeaway from that, though, is it made me get really scrappy and tap into different sales channels that I hadn't thought about before to unload some of my inventory. It really made me kind of just learn a little bit more. And now as we're growing into new avenues, new sales verticals, this growth now is happening very quickly. And I was telling Dave, actually, I'm kind of pumping the brakes a little bit because I don't want to get into that situation where I'm growing too fast again. Because it's a problem. It's a good problem to have, but it's still a problem nonetheless. And you need to make sure that everything is in place to handle that growth, that you have everything in place, employees in place to be able to handle your company as it grows and kind of rides that wave. So I'm glad that I had that problem before because now I have really learned from it. So now we're going to really nurture the accounts that we have, grow with them, and when we're ready to take on more, we will.
For me, it's the totality of failures more than any individual one. So if you're a baseball player and you get on base at a 300% rate, you're doing something really special. As an entrepreneur, we feel every single thing that we don't get on base with, and so 70% of the time failing is crushing, and it's more learning how to live that kind of life, knowing that if 70% of the things you try fail, you're still doing really awesome. In the prep conversation, I was saying that to me, success is not whether I win today or not. Success to me is momentum, and if I've moved forward today, I'm successful, and I try to remember that every single day.
Yes, that's a great point. So I would say reframing failure. So my failure examples, I think if I had handled them differently and not seen them so much as a failure, they probably wouldn't have been so bad. So my failures, and there have been several of them, relate to partnering with the wrong people. So when we do development for clients, we outsource that development. We've been burned a few times in terms of outside development partners, lose money, look bad in front of the client, and the project still isn't finished. So that's happened a few times. And in terms of hiring people as well, they ghost you on the project. Again, you're out the money and the project still isn't finished. So that makes you feel pretty terrible, makes the client not like you, and if I handled it a little bit better, it probably wouldn't have been so bad. But at that point in time, it felt pretty terrible.
I think we have time for one more question. Or do we not have time? One question from the floor.
All right. So, one of the things that I struggle with as I'm looking to grow my business is family. I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, pay an enormous amount of money for daycare. And how do you structure your time to be able to handle family, life, finances, and ensure that you can drop your daily, minute, second coins in each one of those buckets?
I'll start with that if you want. My kids are young. They're 4 and 8 now. They were 1 and 5 when I was getting the company started. Delilah's my 8-year-old. She goes to the warehouse with me every morning. We drop the little one off at daycare, and we swing by the warehouse. I make the rules. So if I'm going to a meeting or an obligation that I have, and Delilah gets to come with me, she's right along with me. And I think that's really important to show your kids that the sky's the limit. I've had a couple of gentlemen in my life where when I was trying to raise money and I was sitting down in front of some really powerful people, there were 2 that will always stick out in my mind. And they sat across the table from me and we were having coffee, and they said, I don't think your company is going to be a success because what do you do with your kids? You're still a mom. And I said, how do I not do this having kids? I have 2 young girls. How do I show them that you can be and do anything that you want? I don't care what your religion is, what color you are, what your education status is, what your economic level is. You can do anything that you want. And how do I not show them that? And I think it's a really powerful tool to have kids. Totally understand all the demands too, because mine are in dance and soccer and, oh gosh, violin, and it's tough. You're an Uber driver half the day, and half your finances are going out the door for daycare. So I totally get all that. It's super stressful and really hard. And sometimes you gotta have a side hustle. I still had my part-time job for a long time. I probably might even go back to it in the fall, because now school's back in session. You just gotta, at least in my life, my kids will always come first. And if that means that I get to show them what mommy does some days, they get to come with me and they get to see what I do and bring their tablet along with them and sit on the sidelines and cheer us on. And some days it's really cool because they'll get to go and do a donation with me, or see a homeless shelter, or see a school that we're helping out or something like that. And it's exciting for them too to see that one person really could make a difference. You have a comment too?
Yeah, so we make it work differently every single day. My husband is a police officer for Arkatecht, and so on the one hand you think, oh wow, a shift schedule, how does that work? But because he works 3rd platoon, so 3 to 11, he watches our 3 girls during the day before my mother or my mother-in-law will come in. I also am currently at RIT Center for Urban Entrepreneurship as the program manager. So time is very limited, but it does force you to really have a plan in place. As for the money component, like I said, we're very fortunate that we don't pay for daycare because of our family being able to come in and help. But in terms of making it work, as I mentioned before, I really try to bring my children into everything that I'm doing as appropriate. We have a 5-year-old, 3-year-old, and an 11-month-old. So the 5-year-old and the 3-year-olds can hang pretty tough when I have to run errands. The 11-month-old is at the stage where she's just about walking, so all bets are probably off in a couple of weeks. But the biggest part is not so sexy, but getting enough sleep. The biggest or the best thing I could say is money is finite. Everything else is finite. Sleep obviously is finite, but if you can just make sure that you get enough sleep, then you can really be creative in terms of where to put the money into the buckets. You can be more creative. But my experiences and actually my work in mental health have shown me that if you don't get enough sleep, everything else falls by the wayside, which may not be the answer you were looking for, but time and time again, when I felt like I'm not able to do one or the other, and certainly not both, I have to remind myself, I need to sleep, I need to rest, I need to take a step back, and once I've gotten back with it, I can do more impactful.
Can you tell that to my 1-year-old?
I'll try.
So we're running out of time, so I just want to take a moment to, I put my son in ballet class during one of my entrepreneurial moments, because my daughter was there, I didn't have any childcare, I had to go to work, and I put him in ballet. He still reminds me, Mom, you put me in ballet. You do what you gotta do. I'd like to thank our panelists for taking the time.